Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a clear LED garden ball. Now I will be using solder for this project, but not as much foil or lead or something on other garden balls, which you'll see. So first of all, I have this silicone ball. Usually this kind of silicone ball you use for mold making, but I'm using it, I'm going to be using the outside of the silicone ball. Now I divided the top with a Sharpie marker, so I have little direct rays of so I have 8 different rays, and I put wires through the actual silicone ball to attach my looped 12 gauge wires onto a ring at the top, and then I gathered them all together on the other end of the ball and twisted the daylights out of them, so they ended up being tight. So this is the bottom of it, and you can see I put on a couple of metal hoops that you can buy, and I'm going to be attaching those hoops also. So I have the hoop at the top, and then I just have a few miscellaneous hoops at the bottom just to keep it round and keep my rays and everything symmetrical. Now I am using right now 26 gauge pure copper wire, and I'm kind of using that and kind of sewing them around, twisting wire around to hold them together before I solder them. Now you could just hold them in place and solder them, right at that moment, and then wash the daylights out of it, so you can work on your project afterwards. I tend to do a lot of the wiring first, get everything all together, and then go down to my soldering shop and solder stuff together. So that's just the way I work. But yeah, if you wanted to, you could just solder without all the wire twisting to keep things together. So I'm doing like almost like sewing little wires around to hold it all symmetrical. Now the hoops themselves are just kind of normal macrame hoops that I purchased on Amazon, and I will leave in the description where you can get some of these hoops. And so I use metal hoops, and then I use foil. You can use black back, but usually for this I just use inexpensive copper backed 7/32 inch foil, and use that to wrap around the hoop the whole way, so that I can end up soldering the hoop to the copper wires. So those big copper wires are 12 gauge half hard copper wire, and that they're really quite sturdy for a nice metal armature for this project. You could use 14 gauge. I just wouldn't get anything thinner than that, because you want to have a kind of a sturdy armature to work off of if you're making one of these balls. So I'm looking at the symmetricality of the hoops opposed to each other and trying to make them all symmetrical and parallel to each other. So now right now I am twisting some 22 gauge wire with a glass chandelier type crystal, and I'm twisting those together. I looped it around the hole in the crystal on the left side. And what I'm doing is I'm making some kind of design to hang off the bottom. I made a lot of these because I was going to hang a whole bunch of them, but it just looked too convoluted, so I ended up just choosing which one I wanted. And basically I'm using these and then just kind of beading them together to make like an interesting lineup of crystals. So I actually am using beads, crystal beads of all different types and sizes, but they're all glass, and they all had the hole going all the way through them, except for the one at the bottom. The bottom would have just one hole, and it would just be at the end. So that was kind of interesting. I didn't want a really long one, and I used round needle nose pliers and kind of twisted together the top, trying to keep them a little bit loose so that they wouldn't they wouldn't like gang up on each other. I wanted them to be kind of loose when I was done. And I did end up soldering that little crimp that I made at the top, but the rest of it's together. I don't need to solder anything else except for that top area that I'm crimping right now. So that's like a little hanging chandelier type little doohickey, and it looked kind of free flowing and shiny. And as you can see, I made a few different ones. And as I said, I was going to put them all on and hang from the bottom of it, but it was just like way too much. So I decided not to do that. Now to hang anything off of my project, I needed to have some little rings. Now, if you take, this was actually 18 gauge bare copper wire, and I wrapped it around, I think it was a Sharpie for this project, but anything that's round and strong, and I wrapped, and made them all like smoothly wrapped around, and then I'm using a pair of wire cutters, and I'm just cutting each one individually. Well, sometimes if your wire cutters are really new and sharp, you can cut a bunch at once. And you want to cut a whole bunch of these and I usually make them in different sizes, so I have a pile of different size little hoops to use wherever I want them. And as you can see, I put one on each wire going up. So what I needed to do now is I needed to tack solder wherever I put the wire to hold the hoops. I needed to put flux on it and solder those. And I also needed to solder the connecting round hoops that I did, those little connection things. I needed, like that guy, I needed to solder him shut, and each one of them, so that they don't come apart later on in my project. So if you have wires that are still loose, you can cut them off. Wherever you did not put a wire to hold it together, you can still solder that if it's in close contact with your other piece of copper. Now I ended up covering that whole bottom twisty thing with solder, but you don't have to. What I'm doing right now is I'm taking off those 18 gauge wires that I used to hold it all in place symmetrically. And these silicone balls, you know, the ones you buy for mold making, like this one, they're really awesome. I mean, you can stab holes in them like this, and you can still use them again and again and again. They're really quite strong. So now that I got rid of the wires that are in the way, I decided I'm going to solder those loopy guys at the top. And you don't have to add solder to all the foiled hoops if you don't want to. See, when I'm done with this bunch of garden balls that I'm making, I'm using copper patina so far. So the copper patina will take the silver solder and turn it copperish color, and anything that I didn't put solder on is already copper, so that's going to be copperish color, so everything will kind of blend nicely together. So if you wanted to leave it silver and have the whole thing silver when you're done, you're going to have to cover the whole thing with solder. If you're going to want to have the whole thing with a black patina when you're done, you're going to have to cover the whole thing with solder, because the black patina will not make the bare copper black. So, you know, unless you're going to paint it, you know, you're going to have to, if you want to patina it, you're going to have to cover it with the solder first. So I'm adding some more solder here and there in places, and where I did not have solder already attached. So every connection and every little loop has solder on it. I'm also adding solder to most of that thing that hangs down, because there are areas on it that the twists of the 12 gauge copper wire, they weren't all the same length, so some of them were shorter. So I wanted to make sure where they met, they were securely soldered on. So like I said, you don't have to completely cover the all of the foiled stuff. Okay, so that was a glove that I used at the end to keep my foam clean, and not the foam, the stuffing clean, so I can use that stuffing again. So that's just like polyfill stuffing you'd use for a stuffed animal or a pillow or something. And you can see that I'm wearing a silicone glove on my left hand there that helps protect your hand from excess heat or solder spatters. So that's really a handy thing to wear. So see that that ball is very usable again. I'll just have to wash it and I can use it again. Now I have my armature and I have those little rings that I originally was going to put the long chandeliers on it, but I ended up changing my mind. And I don't mind changing my mind when I'm making things. They're kind of like, I let them dictate as I go what I want to do. I don't like design the whole thing, you know, and then just stick to everything. Sometimes, you know, sometimes you want to change your mind. That's okay. So right now I am using square chandelier pieces of glass that have 2 holes in them. So I'm using my 26 gauge copper wire to kind of sewing like looping on through those holes the square glass. And I am going to solder them securely afterwards, but I do need to attach them. Now, sometimes when I make projects, I go foil all the way around the edges and then I solder it on that way. But with these chandelier type glass crystals that you can get, if they already have holes in them, you can utilize the holes and then you don't have to do any foiling around them to hold them in place. So yeah, you end up with that look of having a hole in the crystal, but it's still a lot easier and a lot cleaner than having to have to foil the whole thing. I'm going through that hole a couple times to give it some strength. And so the wire you want to use to do this, you want to use a bare copper wire, and you want to make sure that it is, or bare brass, both of them will work. You want to make sure though that it's thin enough to go through the hole of your crystal that you bought, and also pretty strong. So you don't want to use something really, really thin, because then it might, you know, you're going through like sharp edges of glass. So the hole that's drilled in the glass is kind of sharp edged. And so you don't want to use really thin wire because it might break. So you want to use kind of as thick a wire as you can get away with, so that it's strong. So I'm putting one of these crystals in each one of these sections on both the top and the bottom of my chandelier. And it looked kind of fun when I was done. I mean, there's a lot of wires there, but that'll all take care of itself. Now I had to figure out what to do in the large spaces. So what I decided to do was to use these octagonal chandelier pieces, which are very, very common, and they come in all different colors. This particular garden, lighted garden design, I am doing it all in clear. But if you wanted to do it in a color, they come in all different colors. So that's not a problem. I haven't been able to find the square ones, you know, like the big ones that I used in a color, but I'm sure if you looked hard, you could probably find those in colors too. So I'm kind of using a technique of wrapping around the top a few times and then wrapping, as you can see, around the loop there a couple times to kind of like keep it all together. And I'm trying to make each one of them the same. So when I do the next one, I'm trying to have that gap between the hoop and the glass chandelier guy the same distance. So that's the hope there. So then again, see, I'm wrapping around the shank of it to kind of, it's almost like, I don't know, doing a fishing lure or something. You're trying to, you're trying to keep it all together. The good thing about this is that the wire is wire and it bends and crimps and stays together, so you don't have to worry about knots really, because you're going to end up soldering it anyway. So it's basically the bending of it will hold it all together. So at this point I am now soldering some more. See, I chose one to put at the bottom, and I'm now soldering all those little wire connections that I made together. So it's all going to be soldered, and you know, once now and then you might need to bend over a wire here and there, but basically I am adding solder to all of the connection wires. Now if some of it doesn't get covered, because I'm going to be patinaing using copper patina, as I said, it'll all blend together. It'll be fine. Now if I was going to use black patina or keep it silver, I would have to probably put more flux on it, heat up each joint a little bit more so that the solder actually went inside and changed the color of it. Or use tinned, you can use tinned wire to begin with, which is nice. It's already silver to begin with, so it will either stay silver if you want it to, or you could patina it and you don't have to worry about covering it all with solder. But if you're using copper wire, it's great. If you want to keep that copper look, you just have to work a little harder if you use bare copper wire and you want to have a silver or black look when you're completely done. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so I am now adding more little solder globs to each connection. And it's kind of fun because the solder will travel wherever there's copper and flux. So it will kind of spread out on its own as you heat up the solder. So I'm soldering away. Most of this particular video I am showing you at 2 times normal speed. So it's not really sped up, but it's not completely normal speed. And you can see that each side chandelier that I made, I added a couple more. Then they're just hanging loose. So there's a lot of dangly chandeliers on this Christmas ball. This Christmas ball is almost like a mini chandelier on its own, because it has all the chandelier glass, and it's going to have the lights on the inside, and it's going to have all the chandelier style crystals. So it gives you that chandelier look when you're done. I am not doing total back soldering. I'm not going inside of the project and worrying about soldering every single joint on the inside, because it's a pretty small project, and I feel that the outside joints are very well soldered. So I'm not worried too much about the inside, but if I see one that looks like it needs a little bit of solder, I am adding solder to it. I'm more concerned that all the loops that hold the individual chandelier pieces are in fact soldered closed. So we don't have any loops that are open, any of the chain link type of things. I don't want them to open up and blow away while this is outside. So at this point, I'm looking at every joint, making sure that everything is in fact soldered. Oops, there's one that's not soldered, so I'm going to have to a little bit of solder there. Okay, yep, that one's soldered now. Oh, we have one down there that needs to be soldered. So basically I need to go throughout the whole thing and make sure every joint has been soldered. And as I said, like right now, I'm going to patina it. I'm showing you when it's not patinaed. It's very coppery with silver areas on it. So I have some copper patina in a spray bottle, and I am lightly spraying on copper patina. Now you don't have to spray it on. You could use a Q-tip or a toothbrush or something. I usually use a toothbrush after I've done some basic spraying to spread it around. The reason I am using the spraying is with a 3-dimensional object like this, it's just really hard to get all the different angles and everything with just using a paintbrush or a Q-tip or a toothbrush. So it's just easier to just keep moving it around and getting most of it done with the spray. And then, as you can see, didn't really waste that much. There's not like huge puddles on the ground, so on my plastic. So that's what it looks like. And this is when it's done outside. So you can see that there is a little different tints of copper, because the copper that's been on the solder is a little bit different color than the copper that's directly on the bare copper wire. And then you can see on the right there, you can see what it looks like at night. So this is in total darkness. So you basically just see the twinkle fairy lights on the inside with some shining through of the crystals. But it's really fun. Looks good in the daytime and the nighttime. Well, thank you for watching, and have fun creating your own. Bye for next time. Till next time. Bye.